Nexus Unprecedented Deep Cuts, Case File 2, The Antonio Vilas Boas Abduction, 1957, The Witness, the Setting, and the Capture. The Antonio Vilas Boas case is historically significant, pioneering the modern alien abduction narrative and providing the earliest, widely publicized claims of physical and sexual contact with extraterrestrials. The year was 1957. The witness was Antonio Vilas Boas, a 23-year-old Brazilian farmer who, by all accounts, was educated and reliable. The setting was his family's isolated farm near São Francisco de Sales, Minas Gerais, Brazil. Antonio preferred working his fields late into the night to avoid the intense tropical heat. On the night of October 15, 1957, he was alone plowing with his tractor. At around 1 a.m., the quiet solitude was violently interrupted. Antonio noticed a light in the sky, a brilliant red star that was rapidly approaching and growing larger. It quickly resolved into a clear shape, a large, roughly egg-shaped or circular craft with a rotating cupola on top and a bright red light on its front. The object slowed, extended 3 landing legs, and settled down on the ground just ahead of him. Terrified, Antonio immediately tried to flee on his tractor. After traveling only a short distance, the tractor's engine and lights abruptly failed. He abandoned the vehicle and fled on foot. He hadn't run far before he was overtaken by 4 small, stocky humanoid figures. They measured about 5 feet tall and were wearing thick, gray, tight-fitting coveralls and helmets that completely obscured their faces. He noted their slanting blue eyes, and that their gloved hands appeared to have only 3 fingers. The creatures communicated not with human speech, but with a series of high-pitched yelps and barks. Antonio attempted to fight back, but the 4 creatures overwhelmed him, seizing him and forcibly dragging him aboard the waiting craft through a small, ladder-like hatch. Inside the clinical craft and the unique entity, once inside the metallic interior, the atmosphere was thick, warm, and strange. The space was dimly lit by a pervasive electric blue-green light. Antonio was taken to a chamber and violently stripped of his clothes. He was then covered from head to toe in a strange, thick, transparent gel or fluid that instantly made him nauseous. He was led into a large semicircular room and placed on a cold, sterile examination table. Above the doorway were strange, unreadable red symbols which he was able to memorize and later reproduce for investigators. The entities then proceeded to perform a clinical examination, including taking a blood sample from his chin. They seemed highly and unnaturally interested in his reproductive system. Following the initial medical exam, Antonio was left alone in a 3rd room. This room suddenly filled with a thick, nauseating gas that smelled terrible. It caused him to become violently ill, forcing him to vomit repeatedly. The purpose of this gas is unknown, perhaps a sedative, a defense mechanism, or part of a sterilization process. The most famous and controversial part of the story then unfolded. After the gas dissipated, a new entity entered the room. This was a female humanoid, similar in stature to the others, but visibly naked and remarkably distinct. Antonio described her as highly attractive, with a beautiful face, deep blue, cat-like eyes, and long platinum blonde hair. Most distinctively, her underarm and pubic hair was bright fire red. She walked toward him, and Antonio claimed she engaged him in forced sexual intercourse. He noted that despite her small frame, she was strong and determined. Procreation, release, and the medical evidence. According to Antonio, the intention of the encounter was unmistakably one of procreation. When the sexual encounter was over, the female entity reportedly paused, looked directly at Antonio, and pointed to her own stomach, then emphatically gestured upward toward the ceiling. Antonio interpreted this gesture to mean that she would raise their resulting hybrid child on her home planet. Shortly after, the male entities returned, dressed Antonio in his clothes, and quickly escorted him back outside. He stood disoriented in the field as the craft took off. He described it as looking like a luminous pumpkin or a large, inverted washbowl as it ascended. It left behind the lingering smell of burnt rubber. He arrived back at his house approximately 4 hours after he had been seized. He was exhausted, severely disoriented, and suffering from intense nausea and headache. Antonio kept the story secret for over a year, fearing ridicule. However, the physical and psychological toll was too great. He began suffering from a recurring skin condition, intense headaches and insomnia. He finally sought help in 1958, consulting with Dr. Olavo Fontes, a renowned Brazilian physician and researcher. Dr. Fontes not only found Antonio psychologically stable, but his medical examination was highly significant. He found small, persistent second-degree burns on Antonio's body, particularly around his jaw and groin. The doctor's conclusion was that the injuries were consistent with localized, high-intensity radiation exposure. Antônio Vilas Boas's willingness to tell his full, detailed, and highly embarrassing story, a story he maintained consistently for the rest of his life, lent extraordinary weight to the case, cementing its historical importance and pioneering the theme of extraterrestrial hybridization that would dominate ufology for decades to come.